Hello, you're watching the news from Kazakhstan. We'll cover all major stories for November 11th. I'm Askat Sharaliyev, and here are the headlines. Former owner of the Alliance Bank, Margulan Sisimbayev, calls everyone who fled the country to return home. Rahat Aliyev changes his internet platform of choice. The exiled son-in-law of the president will now use Facebook. The parliament will review a number of amendments introduced to freeze skyrocketing food prices. One-year probation. This sentence was issued to a trade union activist of the exploration and production Kazmunaygas branch Dagan Kashanov. The oilman was found guilty of illegal drug possession. The trial lasted for 2 days and none of the activist's relatives or friends were allowed inside the courtroom. The trial participants say the case was obviously fabricated, as witness testimonies contradicted each other. Nevertheless, the final ruling will not be challenged.
The court sentenced him to 1-year probation. The hearing just ended and we agree with the verdict, hoping that the authorities are not going to persecute him.
The former board chair of the Alliance Bank, Margulan Sisimbayev, who returned to Kazakhstan in late October, called a briefing in Almaty on Thursday. There, the banker said that he is ready to cooperate with the investigation on the affairs of the Alliance Bank top managers charged with embezzlement of more than $1 billion. While returning home, Sisimbayev has secured the guarantees of just investigation and expressed his loyalty to President Nazarbayev.
Following 1.5 years of negotiations with the authorities and another year of being on the international wanted list, Margulan Sisimbayev is now seen giving allegiance to the state system. Journalists were informed about the briefing of the Alliance Bank ex-board chairman just 40 minutes before it began. However, the National Press Club was still overcrowded. After my return, there was numerous attempts to persuade me to use my criminal case for political purposes and spoke against the policies of the head of state. Sisimbayev said that he could never do such a thing. He was never a part of the opposition and declined all offers to join it. The banker always valued the policies of the president and remembers his native village. The rumors about the friendship of a former shepherd with an A student nicknamed Kolkhoznik, the redneck, were circulating since 1990s. Back then, President Nazarbayev received a message from a law student of the Kazakh State University with a request to help him open his business. I promised to work solely on the interests of my homeland, wrote Sisimbayev. My future as a businessman and citizen is inseparable from the future of Kazakhstan, and I am ready to work for its benefit. Now Sisimbayev publicly promises to assist the investigation, willingly answering all questions of journalists. Almost all of my family of 40 people was abroad, so we felt practically no pressure at all. As for conditions, I was not in a position to demand anything. The millionaire is not planning to return to banking, as doesn't know how his criminal case will turn out. I don't know how I'm going to serve my term, but people say the sooner you get it, the sooner you get out. Generally, it seems that Sisimbayev is not really disturbed by the situation. Just a year ago, he refused to return to Kazakhstan without receiving the feasible guarantees of justice. Now he appeals to all political outlaws, asking them to return to Kazakhstan. Sisimbayev left the press club on a luxurious BMW, which proves that the guarantees he asked for were given to him after all.
The UN has accepted the petition of a famous Central Asian human rights activist Evgeny Zhovtis, who wants the organization to challenge his sentence of 4 years for a lethal car accident. Many experts believe it was important for the authorities to silence the activist during Kazakhstan's chairmanship of the OSCE, as he could have clearly explained the truth about the country's policies both abroad and home. The director of the Open Society Justice Initiative, James Goldstone, said, quote, "This case sheds some light on the regular flaws of the Kazakh judiciary system, including its vulnerability to political interference." The next story has more.
Evgeny Zhovtis is trying to contest his verdict and penalty in the UN Committee on Human Rights. The imprisoned human rights activist is confident that the state had a goal of shutting him up by sentencing to 4 years. Zhovtis calls his trial unjust and feels that he is subjected to humiliation. In total, the personal notification sent to New York consists of 75 pages. Notably, this is the first petition from Kazakhstan accepted by the UN Committee on Human Rights. Perhaps it is very symbolic that the case of a human rights activist will be the first, namely the case of Zhovtis against Kazakhstan. And of course, we hope that the committee will recognize this complaint as valid. Zhovtis explains his appeal by the Article 14 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and started collecting materials for the complaint since the investigation. The document includes all the arguments and facts gathered by international observers from more than 10 different NGOs which monitored the trial. The Kazakh Justice Ministry categorically disagrees with their opinion, saying Zhovtis is serving his term deservedly, while his complaints are nothing more than an unwillingness to follow the charter. Our facilities, like military ones, have a strict regime. Dinner at 6, check-up at 9, lights out at 10. This regime has to be followed. This is a colony settlement, not home, where you can do whatever you want. Those who do not follow the rules are reprimanded. Even though the Committee on Human Rights accepted the document, it has yet to examine it, as the United Nations is a rather slow organization. Colleagues of the human rights activists hope that the importance of Zhovtis' case will speed up the process.
The Truth is Immoral. This is the name of the new book written by veteran Kazakh dissident Karishal Asanata and presented on Thursday in the office of the unregistered party Alga. The history of relations between the writer and the authorities goes back to the Soviet times, when he opposed Kunaev, then Kolbin, and now Nazarbayev. All of Asanata's troubles and legal battles can now be found in the new book.
The new book of Karishal Asanata chronicles and analyzes all of his articles and publications at the time of struggle, first with the Soviet authorities and later with the regime of Nursultan Nazarbayev. This includes Asanata's speeches at international conferences and rallies. For the first time, the book talks about all litigations of the author, as well as his participation in parliamentary and presidential elections. The first readers were the opposition politicians who shared their opinions about the book. I am sure that this book will change anyone who reads it. The person will gain the qualities of a citizen who not just lives, but every minute strives to make our motherland better for all of us. Karishal Asanata is known to the wider public as a presidential candidate and lone rebel, who, despite lacking the support of any party or public movement, has repeatedly found success. In the past, he entered open confrontation with Soviet top officials and continued to demand honest and open answers from the head of state after Kazakhstan gained independence. Asanata says that the decades-long struggle was not initiated by him, but in fact by the president himself. Instead of an open dialogue, Nazarbayev chose the path of harassment and persecution. Through the years, the author's views on politics of the government didn't become softer. We celebrate Nazarbayev's anniversary for the entire year. There was nothing like that even during Stalin's times. When asked by reporters where the book can be bought, the author said he can personally give it to anyone interested. During the author's session, Asanata said he is waiting for proposals to expand the circulation or publish the book on the internet. To tell the truth, there are only 1,000 copies of the book. If they will end up in a store, Secret Services will buy out the entire circulation.
It looks like the motto of immortal truth could also be employed by the president's former son-in-law Rahat Aliyev. After his life journal was suspended indefinitely, the exiled politician decided to switch to Facebook. The intention was revealed through his personal website rahat.org, where Aliyev also shared his views on why his life journal ended up frozen. The politician believes it was done in agreement with Kazakh authorities on the eve of the OSCE summit in response to the deblocking of the access to the popular blog platform in Kazakhstan.
The exiled former son-in-law of the Kazakh president Rahat Aliyev has commented the situation over the suspension of his account in the life journal. Aliyev's articles exposing Kazakh politicians were no longer accessible since Monday. It's a pity that Rahat Aliyev's posts are no longer accessible because he supplied very interesting information which could not be found anywhere else. The ex-son-in-law of the president is confident that the suspension of his account was paid for with big money and due to the upcoming OSCE summit. Life Journal became inaccessible in Kazakhstan 3 years ago when Rahat Aliyev registered an account in it. It is possible the access will be back by the summit's opening. I can only imagine how many millions of dollars were written off by Nazarbayev's spin doctors to bribe the LG. Of course, at least a half was pocketed out of habit. Then they triumphantly reported about it to the boss. Let's see how whether Akorda can bribe billionaire and social network owner Mark Zuckerberg, because our next step will be Facebook. Experts of the movement Kaznet Freedom also believe in the possible collusion involving Life Journal owners, and the suspension of the account followed the behind-the-scenes talks with the pro-Kremlin oligarch Alexander Mamut, the platform's true owner. Facebook is the next step, with its 150,000 users from Kazakhstan, unlike Life Journal, which only has 8,000. Aliyev will definitely try to use all available resources. The authorities should just finally change their policies and lift the blockade, because chasing Rahat Aliyev and depriving citizens of information is just nonsense. If Aliyev will choose Facebook as his new platform while authorities respond in their usual way with another blockage, the consequences will be much more severe. Kazakh bloggers already joke that David Fincher can already start working on the remake of his social network.
In the meantime, Rahat Aliyev's former wife and daughter of President Nazarbayev, Darigha Nazarbayeva, made her first public appearance in quite some time. She attended a conference dedicated to the achievements of modern oncology and radiology. The head of the first president's fund said her organization will now annually buy one oncomobile to use in the country's rural areas. The project will be sponsored by patrons. Officials supported the optimisms of the president's daughter and reported that the rate of cancer-related deaths has decreased significantly in Kazakhstan. Unfortunately, private organizations hold very different statistics.
Kazakhstan has almost beat cancer, reported officials during the conference on the achievements of the modern oncology. The health ministry says its increased budget allowed lowering the mortality rates. Doctors learned how to detect the disease at the early stages. Currently, there are about 29,000 people with cancer in Kazakhstan. The most common types are still lung, breast, skin, stomach and cervical cancer. One of the main programs is the supply of patients with 62 types of oncologic and chemomedicine. All of this is done by the state for free. During the event, Darigha Nazarbayeva, the head of the first president's fund, presented the oncomobile. Nazarbayeva said this was the only special vehicle in the country created for rural areas. At the same time, the project needs sponsors, as the state has no money for it yet. The $250,000 that can help tens of thousands of people is not that much on the scale of the country. We have many very rich people who love their home and are ready to help. The leader of the public fund Healthy Asia, Nagima Plakih, didn't stay at the conference for long. With no state support or major financing, she examines women's cancer in the remote areas of the country for already 4 years. She does have an oncomobile, like Nazarbayeva, although a much cheaper one. Hopelessness, lack of funds and absence of diagnosis, there are the problems in Kazakhstan. Plakih says the incidence is actually on the rise. Bad environment and poor living conditions aggravate the situation. Even 12-year-old girls can now be found suffering from breast cancer. Red tape in obtaining the quota treatment also contributes to the development of the disease, as most citizens of the country do not even know that the treatment is free.
Kazakhstan is the first country in the world which will soon get rid of corruption, specifically in about 20 years. This bold statement was made by the member of the ruling party who carried out the instructions given by the nation's leader. Just recently, Nazarbayev said he wants to see the tightening of the anti-corruption efforts.
Nuratan proposes new methods on tightening anti-corruption measures. The initial request came from the party leader Nursultan Nazarbayev last week. However, nothing radical was offered, and politicians still insist that the best plan of action is to suspend corrupt officials from the state service for good. An official caught on corruption should no longer work for the state. The head of the Anti-Corruption Council, Aralbay Abdukarimov, claims that a state servant has to run public accounting on profits and property. Apparently, it would be even better if state servants will start denouncing on each other in the best Soviet traditions. However, even Abdukarimov himself doubts the effectiveness of these measures. Nothing like that will be used in our time, but in 20 years you will remember my words and see that laws like this will be enforced if the corruption will not be eliminated by then. The idyllic anti-corruption discussion was disrupted by the political opponents. Representatives of the Social Democratic Party Azad decided to make their own contribution in the fight against the corruption. I represent Social Democrats. We just want to work jointly with the financial police, prosecutor and the ruling party without criticism and rallies. Let's work together on the issue of corruption. After listening to the opposition, Nuratan yet again forwarded an initiative to open a high party school. According to party members, only this school will be able to raise the intelligence, honor and conscience of the current generation.